Hello and welcome to the channel. Today we are going into our /nosleep on a 4-part journey written by page turner 627. This is part 3 and previous parts will be linked in the description. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe and ring that bell for future updates. Without any further hesitation, let's dive in. A killer gave us a list of instructions we have to follow, or more will die, part 3. Written by page turner 627. As the creature maneuvers through the shadows of the chapel, the scraping of its scales against the cold stone sends shivers through the air. The hiss of its breath mingles with the faint, agonized moans from Audrey, pinned down by pain in the center aisle. Signaling frantically with my hand, I manage to catch the eye of the 2 remaining agents hidden behind the altar. I motion a hurried plan, anything to buy us a minute, a chance. They nod grimly, understanding the desperation in my silent plea. Covering fire on my mark, I mouth, counting down with my fingers. The agents ready their weapons, eyes locked on the serpentine horror. Now! I shout, and the chapel erupts with the sharp crack of gunfire. Bullets pepper the air, aimed at the creature as it rears back, hissing angrily. Its feathers puff out, deflecting some shots but clearly disoriented by the onslaught. Audrey's pained groans grow louder as I break cover and make a mad dash towards her. Her face is etched with agony, eyes squeezed shut as she tries to press her hand against the wound on her arm. I slide to the ground beside her, grabbing her under her shoulders. "Hang on, we're getting out of this," I shout over the roar of our covering fire. We're exposed, every second out in the open a gamble against death. I move as quickly as I can, half dragging, half carrying Audrey towards the relative safety of a shattered pew. Sharp feathers fly past us, embedding into the wooden beams and stone walls with deadly precision. A feather grazes my shoulder, slicing through the fabric of my jacket with a hot sting that sends me reeling. Audrey grips my arm, her voice strained but sharp. "Ramón, behind you!" I twist around just in time to see the serpent, its jaws agape and lined with needle-like teeth, lunging towards us. Instinctively, I throw myself and Audrey to the side, the creature's jaws snapping shut inches from where my leg had been. The ground trembles under the impact as the creature's head thuds into the stone floor where we had just lain. Audrey, despite her injury, manages to wrestle her sidearm from its holster. The first shot goes wide, a deafening echo in the cramped space of the chapel, missing the creature as it twists violently. But she steadies her arm, squints through the agony, and squeezes the trigger again. This second shot finds its mark. The bullet hits the creature square in the jaw, an explosion of dark, viscous blood that sizzles when it hits the stone tiles. The impact is so forceful it severs the lower part of the jaw completely, leaving it hanging grotesquely by a thread of sinew and skin. The creature lets out a terrible, gurgling scream, its eyes flashing a ferocious red as it thrashes wildly, sending debris flying. Its blood, a luminescent combustible fluid, splatters across the aged wooden pews and the dry, splintered walls of the chapel. The chapel, already reeking of decay and abandonment, swiftly becomes a tinderbox. With each convulsive swing of the creature's injured body, more of the incendiary blood soaks into the porous wood, which starts to smolder under the chemical heat. Amidst the chaos, the air grows thick with the acrid smell of burning resin, the smoke billowing in dense clouds that claw at my throat and sting my eyes. Audrey, half dragged to a marginally safer corner, coughs violently, her face smeared with sweat and grime. Grabbing my partner's arm, I look around for an escape route. The main door through which we entered is now enveloped in flames, the fire feeding hungrily on the old varnished wood. "The back!" I shout, nodding towards a small barred window that might just be large enough for us to squeeze through. As Audrey and I stagger toward the back of the chapel, the air grows hotter, filled with the thick, choking smoke from the burning wood. The creature, wounded and enraged, thrashes less coherently now, its movements becoming sluggish as it bleeds out the luminous, flammable liquid. Every drop that hits the floor ignites another flame, spreading the fire rapidly across the chapel's interior. I glance back to see that only one of the agents, Delgado, has followed us to the back. The other agent, Ortega, isn't so lucky. As the chapel devolves into an inferno, he's caught by a torrent of the creature's blood. The flames envelop him instantly, wrapping around his body in a fiery embrace. At first, Ortega's screams cut through the roar of the flames, his body a silhouette against the firestorm. He flails, trying desperately to beat back the flames that devour his uniform and sear his flesh. But his movements slow, becoming jerky and unnatural, as if he's no longer in control of his own body. Then, eerily, he stops screaming. His charred form straightens up, turning towards us with an uncanny precision. His movements no longer those of a man in agony, but of a puppet jerked by invisible strings. His eyes, what's left of them, glint with a strange, reflective quality under the flickering light of the fire. He doesn't seem to feel the pain anymore, his body moving with a dreadful intent as he comes closer, the heat from his smoldering flesh making the air waver in front of him. Back! I shout to Audrey and Delgado, pushing them toward the small window at the back of the chapel. I reach it first, smashing through the bars with the butt of my shotgun. The metal gives way with a screech, opening up a narrow escape route from the burning hell inside. Audrey, weakened by her injury and the smoke, coughs harshly, her body heaving with each breath. I grab her under the arms, practically carrying her to the window. She struggles through first, the jagged edges of the broken window tearing at her clothes as she squeezes through. Delgado helps from the other side, pulling her out and away from the inferno. I'm about to follow when Ortega's hand clamps down on my ankle with an iron grip. His skin is hot, almost scalding to the touch, yet the flames don't spread to me. His eyes are no longer human, but something darker, emptier.
No pueden huir de lo que viene.
El ciclo debe completarse. You cannot escape what is coming. The cycle must be completed, he intones, his voice echoing with a reverberating depth that seems to come from far away. With a desperate effort, I kick at his grip, my boot connecting with his face. There's a sickening crunch, but it doesn't seem to affect him as it should. Instead, he simply releases me, his expression empty as he turns back towards the flames that now fully engulf the chapel. I scramble through the window, tumbling out into the cooler air of the evening, rolling to extinguish any embers that might have caught on my clothes. As we catch our breaths, the smoke billowing from the chapel begins to swirl and coalesce into a larger, more menacing form. It's as if the smoke itself is alive, gathering into a dark, dense cloud above the chapel. The shape it forms is both vague and disturbingly familiar. A giant, winged creature, its wings spread wide across the sky, casting a massive, ominous shadow over the land beneath it. As we watch, frozen and horrified, the figure raises what looks like an arm, pointing directly at us before dissipating into the night air, leaving behind only the chaotic dance of the flames. As we stare up at the dissipating smoke, an icy knot of dread tightens in my gut. Audrey leans heavily against me, her breathing shallow and ragged, but it's the look in her eyes that says it all. She's thinking the same thing. We didn't just survive a freak encounter. We played right into the hands of something much bigger and darker than we could have imagined. The chapel's structure finally gives way under the inferno's wrath, the building collapsing in on itself as we make our way into the darkness. As the last embers of the chapel's destruction flicker in the night, the sounds of approaching sirens and the thumping of helicopter blades fill the air. Within minutes, the area around the burned-out chapel becomes a hub of frantic activity as backup arrives, bringing an armada of armored vehicles, SWAT teams, and multiple news helicopters circling overhead like birds of prey eager for a story. Amidst the chaos, medics rush to our side. Audrey, pale and shivering from shock and blood loss, is quickly attended to. I'm examined for injuries, a few burns and that deep cut on my shoulder from a creature's feather. As we're being patched up, sitting on the back of an ambulance, officers coordinate to contain the area, while firefighters tackle the all-consuming blaze. Sheriff Marlene Torres herself arrives at the scene just as the flames begin to die down, her expression set in a hard line that speaks volumes before she even steps out of her cruiser. Her silver hair, usually styled meticulously, is pulled back into a no-nonsense ponytail tonight, and her sharp gray eyes scan the scene with both horror and an unmistakable edge of anger. Beside her, Captain Barrett emerges, his burly frame tense with the urgency of the night's events. Torres doesn't waste time on pleasantries.
Her eyes sweep the scene, burning remains, exhausted officers, and then land on me with an intensity that makes me straighten up despite the pain.
Detectives, what the hell happened here? Her voice is controlled, but there's an undercurrent of fury that tells me she's barely holding it back. I stand, though the medic tugs at my sleeve, signaling that he's not done. Ignoring him, I step forward. Sheriff, we followed the leads to this chapel, based on evidence we gathered.
Leads? She interrupts, her tone rising slightly with incredulity.
Leads don't usually end with half the county's emergency services scrambling to contain what looks like a scene from a horror movie. Barrett doesn't bother hiding his frustration as he looks from me to the wreckage and back again.
I gave you clear instructions, Castillo, he growls, his voice low but carrying in the quiet night.
I told you, low profile, assess and extract. I wince, both from the sharpness in his tone and the ache in my shoulder. Sir, we encountered something unexpected.
The situation escalated quickly. Unexpected.
Barrett's scoff is sharp as he gestures broadly at the chaos around us. Understatement of the century. What we have here is a full-scale crisis.
Audrey, though grimacing with pain, tries to interject. Sir, with all due respect, we couldn't have anticipated.
Barrett cuts her off, his voice booming even over the distant clamor of emergency vehicles. I don't want to hear it, Dawson. We lost good people tonight. Good people who relied on you to make the right call.
He shakes his head, adding, God damn it.
I have to go and tell families that their loved ones aren't coming home.
His words sting more than the physical injuries.
Torres cuts through the simmering tension with a brisk wave of her hand, her gaze sweeping the wreckage once more before settling on Barrett and us. I don't have time for this. I've got a PR nightmare to manage and a press conference in less than an hour. Barrett, handle this.
Without waiting for a response, she turns on her heel and heads back to her cruiser, her team in tow, leaving a palpable void that Barrett fills with his formidable presence.
He steps forward, his expression grim and resolute under the flashing lights of the approaching fire trucks. Castillo, Dawson, you're both suspended until further notice. Barrett's voice is flat, almost mechanical, in its delivery.
He extends his hand, not in offer but in demand. Badges and guns now. Audrey and I exchange a glance, the weight of the situation sinking in.
With heavy hearts, we comply, unclipping our badges and handing over our service weapons. The cold metal feels foreign as it leaves my hands. Get yourselves debriefed and go home. I'll be in touch about the formal proceedings. His tone leaves no room for argument, and with a final nod, he turns away, leaving us to face the chaos of the night on our own. As the last flickers of chaos die down and the heavy tread of emergency responders fades into a rhythm, Audrey and I find a brief respite in the cruiser. I pull out my phone, noticing the barrage of missed calls and texts from my wife Rocio. My stomach tightens as I remember telling myself I'd call back, only I never did. The screen shows her messages, simple check-ins that progressed to more worried tones as the night dragged on without a word from me. I swallow hard, feeling the familiar pang of guilt tighten around my chest. There's a voicemail from her that stands out. The timestamp shows it was left just a few hours ago. I press play, the phone held close to my ear, bracing myself for her anger at not calling her back. Her words are hurried, her tone edged with panic. Ramón, I don't know what's going on, but there's someone outside the house. They've been lurking around since dusk, just standing there across the street, watching. I called the police, but they said they're stretched thin tonight with some emergency and might take a while. I'm scared. As the voicemail played, I put the phone on speaker, letting Audrey listen. Rocio's voice, usually so calm and composed, was laced with undeniable fear. The boys say they heard scratching at the wall. Her tone edged with panic. I think I saw a shadow move past the back window. Rocio's voice cracks as the background noises grow louder on the voicemail, the unmistakable sound of shattering glass piercing through her words.
Ramón, they're in the house.
Her scream slices through the air, raw and terrified, followed by the high-pitched cries of our boys, their fear palpable even through the digital recording. The voicemail cuts off abruptly, leaving a haunting silence that chills me to the bone. My hand shakes as I lower the phone, the afterimage of the call's timer blinking mockingly back at me. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Let me know what is your favorite no-sleep story in the comments below. Stay safe and stay vigilant as the night hides the unseen.